All right, so are you ready to dive into this list of 99 words? It's supposed to be like the most useful words for daily conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating idea.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's like, this linguistic survival kit, like, if you only had 99 words to work with,
Right.
could you actually communicate?
It's like the bare minimum of language.
It is. And what's really interesting to me is like, thinking about this list as a way to understand how humans make meaning,
Oh, yeah.
with just, the fewest possible pieces.
Like a linguistic Lego set.
Exactly. It's like reverse engineering language,
But it is.
We're starting with like this simplified model.
Right.
And using it to understand this complex system.
Exactly.
So cool. Before we break down all the categories and like go word by word.
Sure.
Let's just take a second to appreciate like how much you can actually say with only 99 words.
Yeah, that is amazing.
I mean, think about it. You can talk about what you did today, how you're feeling, even like make plans for the future, all with just this tiny little vocabulary.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start unpacking these categories.
Okay.
The first one is greetings.
Right.
And I immediately was like, why include both hello and hi?
Yeah. Why both?
It seems like such a subtle distinction for such a small vocabulary.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I think that subtle difference actually speaks volumes about like formality in language.
Oh, interesting.
Hello is generally considered more formal. Hi is a more casual. It's a really simple choice, but it can kind of signal a lot about the relationship between speakers.
Yeah, it's like choosing your weapon linguistically speaking.
That's a good way to put it.
You don't want to use the wrong level of formality in the wrong situation.
Exactly.
So even in the stripped down vocabulary, it seems like social nuance is still really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's move on to actions.
Okay.
And right away, I'm intrigued by make and do.
Oh, yeah.
These seem super basic, but like, I feel like there's so much hidden complexity there.
Well, they're like the Swiss Army knives of language.
Yeah.
And I think it's a clue to how language evolves.
Right.
You start with these really broad verbs like make and do. But then as societies get more complex, you need more precise words.
Right.
But we still hang on to those multi-purpose verbs because they're just so useful.
It's like they're carrying the weight of all those more specific verbs within them.
Exactly.
Instead of saying construct or manufacture, we can just say make.
Right.
Okay, moving on to descriptions.
Right.
This is where I got really interested.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of words for emotions on this list. Happy, sad, tired, hungry, thirsty. Why prioritize feelings so much?
Well, think about it. Being able to communicate basic needs like hunger and thirst. Those are essential for survival.
Yeah.
And emotions like happiness or sadness, they're really powerful signals.
Yeah.
They can influence how other people interact with you.
Right.
So in a way, they're just as important as actions or objects when you're trying to get your point across.
It's not just about conveying information.
Right.
It's about expressing your internal state.
Exactly.
Which can be super crucial for navigating social situations.
Definitely.
All right, next up we have time and frequency.
Hey.
And what I find fascinating about this category
Yeah.
is how it highlights like the human struggle to understand something that is actually really abstract.
Oh.
Time.
It's true. Time is a weird one.
Yeah.
It's like these basic time concepts aren't as straightforward as they seem.
I know.
We humans, we perceive and organize time in a way that's like unique in the animal kingdom.
Right.
We use language to create a framework for understanding something that's inherently intangible.
And here, with just a handful of words, always, sometimes, never, we have a whole system for expressing like complex ideas about, when things happen, how often they happen.
Right.
It's like building a whole universe of time with just a few linguistic Legos.
Yes, that analogy.
Right.
It really is. It's a testament to the power of language to make sense of the world around us.
Totally. And it highlights how even seemingly simple words can carry a lot of weight.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, let's move on to the category of places.
Okay.
What immediately jumped out at me here is the word workplace.
Okay.
But there aren't any specific jobs listed.
Right.
And it made me think, is this a reflection of how work is viewed in modern society?
That's a really interesting observation. I mean, workplace is a much more generalized space than, say, farm or factory.
Yeah.
This could indicate like a shift towards a world where work happens in a variety of settings.
Okay.
And of course, language adapts to reflect these societal changes.
So this seemingly simple word choice might actually be a clue about the intended audience for this list.
Interesting.
Someone navigating a more, modern, fluid work environment.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm really curious to dig into what's missing from this list, because it's often the omissions that are the most revealing, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. What's left AUT of a language can tell us just as much as what's included. Sometimes that's where the real story is.
It's like looking at the negative space in a painting, right?
Yeah, sometimes that's where the real story is.
Okay, so the first thing that jumps out at me is the lack of slang or informal language.
Okay.
This list is very proper and polite. Why do you think they made that choice?
That's a good question.
It seems like it would make it harder to like really connect with native speakers, you know?
Well, I think slang is so hyper-specific to a time and place. This list seems to be aiming for like a timeless, almost international version of English.
Okay.
Something that would be understood across cultures.
Right.
And wouldn't sound dated in a few years.
So it's like they're going for the most universally applicable version of English.
Right.
Even if it means sacrificing some of the, richness and nuance of everyday speech.
Exactly.
It's interesting to think about the trade-offs, right? You gain clarity and broad understanding, but you lose some of the color and personality that slang can bring.
For sure. And it raises an interesting question about the purpose of language itself.
Oh, yeah.
Is it primarily about conveying information? Clearly and efficiently?
Right.
Or is it also about expressing identity?
Yeah.
Building relationships?
Right.
Playing with the creative possibilities of words?
All right, so we've talked about the missing slang,
Right.
but there's another omission that really struck me. The lack of abstract concepts.
Okay.
We've got love and hate, which seem pretty fundamental, but that's about it.
It's true.
Why do you think that is?
It seems like this list prioritizes concrete needs
Okay.
and immediate experiences over more complex or nuanced ideas.
I see.
I mean, if you're focused on basic survival and communication,
Right.
you probably don't need to be like debating the meaning of life.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess when you're trying to build a language from scratch, you have to start with the essentials.
The bare minimum.
The things you need to physically survive and navigate the world around you.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to some of the categories that are included.
Right.
And questions feels like the most essential of all, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, questions are how we learn, how we explore, how we connect with others on a deeper level.
Couldn't agree more.
They're fundamental to the human experience.
For sure.
And look at the words they've chosen. What, where, when, why, how.
The classic 5 W's.
It's like they're targeting the most fundamental aspects of our experience, like the nature of things, their location, their timing, their causes, and their methods.
Yeah, it's like the building blocks of curiosity.
Right.
You know, those 5 W's, those are practically universal across languages.
Wow.
That tells us something about the fundamental ways that humans seek to understand the world.
It's like we're hardwired for curiosity. We need to know the who, what, where, when, and why of everything.
We do.
Okay, let's move on to connectors. These are the words that link ideas together, right?
Right, like the glue that holds language together.
And the ones they've chosen, and but or because. So they're like the basic building blocks of logic and reasoning.
Absolutely. They allow us to create more complex sentences.
Right?
To show cause and effect. Contrast ideas.
Yeah.
Offer alternatives.
It's amazing how much nuance you can add with just a handful of words.
It really is.
Okay, so then we come to the miscellaneous category.
Right.
This one feels a bit like a catch-all.
It does. A little bit of everything.
But like they're acknowledging that even in a simplified vocabulary, we still need ways to talk about the things that matter most to us.
Right.
Our relationships, our values, our place in the world.
Yeah, we've got thing which is about as general as it gets.
Right.
But then you've got life, world, friend, family.
Interesting how they grouped those concepts together.
It is. It suggests an awareness of the interconnectedness of our experiences.
Right.
Even in a very basic vocabulary.
And then, of course, there's words like money car house.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if that reflects a certain emphasis on material possessions.
Perhaps. Or maybe just the practical realities of daily life in many cultures.
True.
But it also speaks to the need for language to evolve alongside our technological advancements.
Okay.
As we create new things, we need new words to describe them.
So I think we've done a pretty thorough job unpacking this list.
I think so.
We've talked about the choices they made, the words they included, the ones they left out, It's really given us a fascinating glimpse into the essential elements of communication, hasn't it?
I think so. It has been a really enriching exploration.
It has.
And I think what's most striking is how this seemingly simple list of 99 words has sparked so many big questions.
Yeah, it really makes you realize that language is so much more than just like a set of words.
It is.
You know,
it's a living, breathing system that's constantly evolving.
It really is.
And reflecting the world around us.
Okay, so we've gone like deep into the nitty-gritty of this list. We've analyzed categories, debated word choices, pondered the missing pieces. But what does it all mean for you, the listener? What can you take away from this deep dive?
I hope it's given you a new appreciation for the power of language.
Right.
Even with just 99 words, you can express a surprising range of, thoughts, feelings, experiences.
Yeah.
It's kind of a reminder that sometimes simplicity can be a strength.
And it makes you think, like, what if you were building your own list of essential words? What would it look like?
What words would you choose?
What would those choices say about you?
That's a great exercise for the listeners.
It is.
To think about the words you use most often.
Yeah.
The ones that feel indispensable in your daily life.
Because language is so personal.
It really is.
It's not just about conveying information.
It's about expressing who we are.
Yeah.
How we see the world.
Right.
What matters most to us.
Exactly. By paying closer attention to the language we use the words, we choose the way we string them together. I think we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.
Totally.
So there you have it, our deep dive into the world of essential vocabulary. It's been a blast exploring this list with you.
It has been.
And hopefully we've left you with some new insights about language communication.
And maybe even a little about yourself.
And remember, this is just the beginning. The exploration of language is a lifelong journey.
It is.
So keep asking questions, keep learning.
Keep playing with words.
And most importantly,
keep talking. All right, so you want to speak English.
Yes.
Right, like with more confidence, I mean.
Yeah.
Go beyond just hello and goodbye,
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving into this guide. It says, it'll unlock the secrets to sounding like a native speaker. And let me tell you, there's some seriously cool stuff in here.
I do.
Way beyond basic phrases.
Okay, so what's interesting about this guide, it challenges the traditional way of learning languages.
Oh, how so?
Well, it argues that instead of focusing only on grammar rules and vocab lists, we should be learning how to actually talk,
Communicate.
Yeah, in real life situations.
Right, that makes sense. But how do you actually go about doing that? I mean, it's easy to say talk more, but what should you actually be saying?
Well, the guide says you should start with simple phrases.
Okay.
Practical phrases that you'd use, in everyday life. Like, think of it as building a foundation for fluency.
Okay.
And it breaks these situations into, like, categories, like introductions, daily routine.
Yeah. Ordering food, asking for directions.
Yeah.
And each category gives you a set of phrases and expressions that native speakers use all the time.
So it's like a cheat sheet.
Yeah.
For like navigating real life conversations.
Exactly.
That's awesome. It takes away some of the pressure, of trying to figure out what to say on the spot.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is the guide encourages you to use these phrases as a springboard.
Oh, cool.
For more extended conversation.
Oh, I like that.
So let's say you're at a coffee shop, right?
Okay.
And you want to start talking to someone.
Okay.
You could start by saying, hi, I'm listener's name. I really like the atmosphere here.
That's so easy.
Right.
Yeah, anyone can do that.
And then you could ask a question like, do you come here often? Or what's your favorite drink?
That's such a good example.
Right.
It's simple, but it opens the door for a more like natural conversation.
Exactly.
But what about this whole
sounding like a native speaker thing?
Okay.
Is it really possible to get rid of your accent?
Well, the guide, it addresses that and offers a really fun technique. Imitation.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It suggests watching popular TV shows or movies and trying to mimic how they're talking.
Wait, so you're telling me I can improve my English by watching Friends?
Exactly.
That's my kind of homework.
And it's not just about the words.
Oh, okay.
It's about paying attention to the intonation, rhythm, and stress patterns. These are super important for sounding natural and fluent.
Okay.
And the guide recommends this technique called shadowing.
Shadowing.
where you listen to like a short audio clip
Okay.
and then you repeat it, like immediately
Oh, wow.
try to match the speaker's pace and pronunciation.
Oh, so that's shadowing.
Yeah.
That sounds intense, but I can see how it'd be effective.
Right.
Those little nuances of pronunciation.
It is.
So it's like you're training your ears and your mouth to like work together.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And the guide says you should start with like really short, simple phrases.
Okay.
And then gradually work up to longer sentences and dialogues.
Yeah.
Key is to be patient and consistent.
Right.
Don't worry about sounding perfect.
No, of course.
Right.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense.
Yeah.
But I have to ask about like
Yeah.
the elephant in the room,
Okay.
vocabulary.
Okay.
I've always struggled with memorizing words,
Right.
long lists of words.
Yeah.
Is there a more strategic way to approach this?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
The guide stresses that simply memorizing words, out of context, it isn't effective. It proposes this strategic vocabulary building.
What's that?
Okay. It focuses on learning words and phrases that are relevant to you,
Oh, okay.
your interests, your goals. So it suggests like making your own word lists
Oh.
based on topics you like, like travel or food, movies, music.
Right. Okay, that sounds way more engaging than flipping through a dictionary.
Right.
But how do you make sure you actually use these words?
Okay, so the guide recommends this technique.
Yeah.
It's called spaced repetition.
Okay.
And it involves like reviewing the words at different intervals to strengthen your memory.
Oh, cool.
There's tons of apps and websites that can help with that.
That's a clever way to keep those words
Yeah.
like fresh in your mind.
Right.
So it's not just about learning new words, it's about like actively using them.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the guide emphasizes the importance of using these words in context.
Okay.
So instead of just memorizing definitions,
Mhm.
try to like make sentences,
Okay.
or even short stories
Yeah.
that use the words. This will help you like actually understand them,
Yeah.
how they're used.
In real life.
Yeah,
That's such a practical tip.
right.
It's one thing to know the definition, but it's another to be able to use it,
Exactly.
like in a sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah, confidently.
The guide suggests finding creative ways to use new words in your daily life.
Oh, like what?
Well, you could label things around your house, write journal entries,
Okay.
challenge yourself to think in English for a few minutes each day.
Thinking in English.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of scary, to be honest.
It might seem challenging,
Yeah.
but the guide breaks it down.
Okay.
It suggests starting with simple thoughts and descriptions,
Like what?
like I'm hungry, or the sky is blue.
Oh.
As you get more comfortable, you can increase the complexity.
I guess it's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect to lift a heavy weight on your first day at the gym.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it takes time
Yeah.
to build strength.
And consistency.
Yeah, consistency.
And the guide emphasizes that the more you expose yourself to the language,
Yeah.
the easier it'll be to think in English. So surround yourself with English,
Books, movies, music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your brain will naturally start to make connections.
Oh, I'm starting to get excited about this.
Yeah.
Thinking in English thing.
It's cool.
But what about those moments when you just blank
Huh?
and you can't remember a word or a phrase?
Okay.
We've all been there.
Of course, happens to everyone, even native speakers.
Okay, good.
But the guide offers some strategies for dealing with those tip of the tongue moments.
Okay, what are they?
Well, it emphasizes staying calm and using circumlocution.
Circumlocution. What's that?
That means, describing the word
Okay.
that you're trying to say.
Oh, so instead of freezing up and saying, I don't know the word,
Yeah.
I could try to describe it
Yeah,
using other words.
exactly.
Like, it's the thing you used to.
Yeah,
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense.
right.
Yeah, it's like playing charades in your
Yeah.
vocabulary.
And the guide says you should practice circumlocution, regularly.
Yeah.
You can play games with friends
Well, that's fun.
where you challenge each other to describe words
Oh, I like that.
without actually saying them.
Okay, we've covered a lot
Yeah.
in this first part of our deep dive, from building a foundation of practical phrases to mastering pronunciation and expanding your vocabulary.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Well, one of the most important aspects of speaking any language is confidence.
Right.
And that's where the guide's emphasis on practice comes in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to just learn the words and phrases.
Right.
You need to actually use them.
Right, and that's where I think a lot of language learners get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to practice at home,
Yeah.
but it's another to actually go out there and talk to people.
Right.
Any tips on overcoming that fear, of making mistakes?
Well, the guide acknowledges that fear, and it gives some advice.
Okay, good.
First, it reminds us that everyone makes mistakes.
Okay.
Even native speakers.
Yeah.
It's a natural part of learning.
But how do you deal with those awkward moments when you say something wrong and people look at you like you've just spoken a foreign language?
The guide says embrace those moments as opportunities to learn.
Okay.
Instead of getting flustered, try to see them as a chance to clarify.
Okay.
And improve your pronunciation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe even your confidence a little.
And it also recommends finding supportive language partners or groups where you can practice.
In a safe environment.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Right.
Surround yourself with people who will support you.
Yes.
Speaking of support, does the guide offer any strategies for actually putting all this speaking practice into action?
It does.
It's easy to talk about it, but how do you actually make it happen?
Well, the guide gives a range of practical tips for incorporating speaking into your routine.
Oh, cool.
Whether you have a partner or not. For solo practice, it suggests things like recording yourself, describing images out loud, telling stories, and even having imaginary conversations.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Those are great ideas. And for those who do have a language partner, what kind of activities does the guide recommend?
Well, the guide's packed with suggestions for interactive speaking activities.
Like what?
Like role-playing common scenarios, debating current events, discussing movies or books.
Okay.
And even playing language-based games.
Oh, that's fun.
The key is to find activities that are engaging and relevant to your interests.
This guide is like a gold mine of advice.
Yeah.
We've barely scratched the surface here of all the tips and techniques.
Yeah.
But before we dive into more specific strategies for improving your speaking, let's take a quick break to process all this awesome information.
Right.
We'll be back soon with more insights from this incredible guide.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into speaking English like you mean it. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling super inspired to put all these techniques into practice.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's so much in here.
It really is.
Before the break, we were talking about, actually using your English and overcoming that fear of making mistakes.
Right.
But what about the technical stuff?
Like what?
Like pronunciation. I know a lot of people, they struggle with specific sounds or accents.
Yeah, that's a good point. Pronunciation is often overlooked.
Yeah.
But it's super important for being understood and sounding more natural.
Yeah.
The guide actually goes into this.
Okay, so what are some things learners should focus on?
Okay, so the guide, it breaks pronunciation into 3 core elements.
What are they?
Individual sounds, word stress, and connected speech.
Okay.
It says that mastering individual sounds is like the foundation.
Okay.
For example, a lot of learners have trouble with the sound.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Which doesn't exist in many languages.
No, it's hard.
Right.
It's like my tongue is doing gymnastics.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So what's the secret to getting it right? Well, the guide says to pay attention to your tongue and teeth.
Okay.
And practice those sounds in isolation until they become more natural.
Oh, okay.
There's a ton of resources online.
Really?
That can show you exactly how to do it.
That's so helpful. I wish I had those when I was learning.
Right.
Okay, so what about word stress?
Word stress.
Why is that so important?
Word stress can completely change the meaning of a word.
Oh, really?
Like, for example, the word present can be a noun or a verb.
Yeah.
Right? And the stress changes depending on which one it is.
Oh, I see.
If you stress the first syllable, it means a gift.
Okay.
But if you stress the second syllable, it means to give something.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, subtle but significant.
So how do you know which syllable to stress? Are there, rules?
There are some patterns.
Okay.
But English pronunciation can be unpredictable.
Yeah, for sure.
The guide recommends listening to native speakers and paying attention to which syllables they emphasize.
Okay.
It also says to, break down words into syllables and mark the stressed syllable.
Oh, that's a good idea.
As you learn new words.
Yeah, make your own pronunciation guide.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So, connected speech.
What's that?
This is about how words flow together.
Okay.
In natural conversation. Native speakers often blend sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Drop syllables.
Oh,
link words together.
Okay.
So, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Often sounds like, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it sounds like they're talking so fast.
Right. They're not just speaking fast. They're connecting the words to make it smoother.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
And the guide points out that understanding this is important for comprehending native speakers and sounding more natural yourself.
Okay.
It recommends listening for those patterns and practicing, through shadowing.
Shadowing again.
Yeah.
It seems like that technique's really useful.
It is.
For pronunciation.
It is.
But let's move beyond pronunciation.
Right.
What about, like, fluency?
Fluency.
How do you get to that point where you can just speak without, hesitating or searching for words?
Fluency is often seen as, like, the holy grail of language learning.
Yeah.
This guide offers some insights.
Okay.
It says that fluency isn't about speaking perfectly.
Oh, good.
Or never making mistakes.
Okay, good.
It's about communicating your ideas effectively and effortlessly.
It takes the pressure off.
Right.
Yeah.
But how do you get to that point of effortlessness?
Yeah. Is it just practicing a lot?
Well, practice is essential.
Yeah.
But the guide says that the type of practice is important.
Okay.
You should do activities that push you a little bit.
Okay.
But not too much.
So like the sweet spot.
Yeah, where you're challenged but not overwhelmed.
Right. Okay. I like that.
Like working out.
Yeah.
You need to challenge your muscles but not hurt yourself.
Yeah. Good analogy.
Right. And the guide encourages learners to experiment.
With different types of practice.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's all about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the guide emphasizes that consistency is key. It recommends practicing every day, even just for a few minutes.
Right. A little bit goes a long way.
Right. The more you use it, the more natural it'll become.
Okay. This is all starting to make sense, but I have to ask about thinking in English.
Okay.
Is it really possible? Like, can you actually switch your brain?
The guide addresses that.
Okay.
And it says that thinking in English is a skill that you can develop gradually over time.
Okay.
It's not about like turning off your native language.
Right.
It's about adding English to your thought process.
But how do you do that?
The guide recommends starting with simple things.
Okay.
Like describing objects around you in English or mentally practicing conversations.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Before you have them.
So like train your brain.
Yeah.
One thought at a time.
Exactly. And the more you immerse yourself, the easier it becomes. Surround yourself with English and your brain will like naturally start to process it.
That's fascinating. It's like rewiring your brain.
Yeah, it is.
What about those moments when you're speaking and you completely blank? You can't remember a word.
Okay.
How do you deal with that?
The guide says, first of all, stay calm.
Don't panic.
Yeah, don't panic.
Right, okay.
Everyone has those moments.
Okay, good.
Even native speakers.
Okay, that's reassuring, yeah.
So the guide suggests using circumlocution.
Circumlocution, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it means describing the word.
Right, yeah.
You're trying to say.
Okay, so like, if I can't remember the word umbrella, I could say, the thing you use to keep the rain off your head.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like playing charades. With your words.
Exactly.
But doesn't that sound awkward?
It might feel awkward.
Yeah.
But it's actually a very common strategy.
Right.
Even among native speakers.
Okay, good.
And it's a great way to like expand your vocabulary and learn to express yourself in different ways.
Okay, so it's turning a communication breakdown into a learning opportunity.
Exactly.
Okay, I love that.
And the guide recommends practicing this regularly.
Okay.
You can even play games with friends.
Yeah, that's fun.
To challenge each other.
We've covered so much.
I know.
In this part, from pronunciation to fluency, vocabulary, and even confidence.
It's a lot.
But there's one crucial element of speaking English like you mean it.
Okay.
That we haven't talked about yet.
Okay, what's that?
Confidence.
Ah, yes.
How do you get that inner assurance?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the guide talks about this.
Okay, good.
It says that confidence comes from a few things.
Okay, like what?
Mastering the technical stuff.
Yeah.
Having good vocabulary. And most importantly, believing in yourself.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about knowing the rules.
Right.
It's about having that, like, inner belief.
Yes, that you can do it.
But how do you get that?
The guide offers some advice.
Okay, good.
It reminds us that everyone starts somewhere.
Right.
Making mistakes is normal.
Yeah.
It encourages you to set realistic goals.
Okay.
Celebrate small wins and focus on progress.
Not perfection.
Not perfection, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Right. It's easy to compare ourselves to others and get discouraged.
Yeah.
But focus on your own journey
and
those small wins.
Okay, I like that.
And the guide also says, Find a supportive environment,
Yep.
whether it's a language partner, a group, or online.
Right. People who will support you.
Exactly.
That's so important
It is.
to have that support.
It is.
And the guy also says,
Yeah.
confidence, it's not a fixed thing.
Right.
It's something you can develop.
You can build it.
Okay, so anyone can become confident
Yes.
in speaking English.
Absolutely.
That's great.
And this guide gives you the tools to do that.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
We've covered so much in this part,
So much.
from pronunciation and fluency
Yes.
to vocabulary and confidence.
It's amazing.
Before we wrap up, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Let all this info sink in.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
We'll explore even more tips
Okay.
for speaking English like you mean it. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into speaking English like you mean it. We've explored so much already, like pronunciation and fluency, but now I'm ready for the action,
Right. Time to put it all into practice.
Yeah, make a plan.
Exactly.
And that's where this guide is really helpful.
It is. It gives you steps you can actually take.
So where do we begin?
Well, the guide says to start by figuring out your goals.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah. What do you want to achieve? Travel. Connect with people. Get a better job.
That's a good point. Got to have a reason.
Right. Then you got to see where you're at now.
Like, what am I good at? What do I need to work on?
Exactly. Be honest with yourself.
Okay, and then what? How do I actually practice?
The guide has tons of activities.
Oh, cool. Like what?
Well, for pronunciation, it suggests tongue twisters or shattering or recording yourself.
Those are good ideas.
Right.
What if I don't have anyone to practice with?
You can still practice solo.
Really?
Yeah, it's just as effective as long as you're consistent.
Okay, cool.
You can describe images out loud, talk to yourself, even make your own podcasts.
Wow, that's creative.
Right. But if you do have someone to practice with,
Yeah.
the guide says to join groups, find a partner, or do online exchanges.
Oh, and talk to people in real life, too.
Exactly, like at a cafe or something.
Okay, but finding time to practice can be hard.
I know, but the guide has tips for staying motivated. Set realistic goals. Break things down into small steps and reward yourself.
Oh, okay, so don't be too hard on myself.
Right, and if you hit a plateau,
Yeah, what then?
revisit your goals, try new things, ask for feedback.
So it's okay to switch things up.
Yeah, and remember why you started learning.
That's a good point.
And there are tons of resources out there to help you.
Like what?
Dictionaries, apps, websites, even just surrounding yourself with English.
Books, movies, music, yeah.
Exactly. Find what you enjoy.
Okay, so we've talked about techniques, practice, resources,
Yeah.
but what about confidence?
Ah, yes, the key ingredient.
It's one thing to know the rules,
Mm.
but it's another to actually feel confident speaking.
The guide has great advice for that.
Oh, good. What does it say?
Remember, everyone makes mistakes. Perfection isn't the goal.
Right, it's about communication,
Exactly. So shift your mindset.
from fear to curiosity.
Exactly. Embrace the challenge. Have fun.
I love that. What an inspiring way to wrap things up.
Right. Speaking English isn't about being perfect.
It's about connecting with people.
Exactly.
Well, I'm feeling super motivated to go out there and practice.
Me too. Remember, embrace the journey
Yeah, enjoy the process.
and keep those conversations flowing.
That's a wrap on our deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to unlock some of the secrets of fluent English.
I think we all know that feeling. Like you understand the individual words, but something's missing.
It's like everyone else is in on a joke and you're left out.
Exactly. And that's where idioms come in, right? They're like these little cultural puzzles that can really trip you up.
And today, we're going deep into the world of idioms, tackling a list of 21 that are key to taking your English from intermediate to advanced, really sounding more natural and fluent.
And idioms aren't just about sounding good, are they? They often give us a glimpse into the history and the culture of a language.
Oh, absolutely. So we'll be unpacking not just what these idioms mean, but also where they come from and how to use them effectively in different situations.
And maybe even a few funny stories along the way. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's get started with our first idiom, a blessing in disguise. Have you ever experienced something that seemed bad at first, but turned out to be a good thing in the end?
I think we all have. It's like that feeling when you miss a flight and then you find out it got delayed for hours anyway.
Exactly. Or maybe you didn't get the job you really wanted, but ended up with an even better opportunity. It's those moments when we realize that things happen for a reason.
And that sometimes what we perceive as setbacks can actually lead us to something much better.
It's like the universe has a plan, right?
Right. And speaking of getting to the point, our next idiom is beat around the bush. I think we're all guilty of this sometimes, especially when we have to have a difficult conversation.
Oh, for sure. Instead of just coming out and saying what we mean, we kind of dance around the topic, hoping the other person will figure it out.
Yeah, like when you want to ask for a raise, but you start talking about how much you love your job and how dedicated you are.
Instead of just saying, hey, I think I deserve a raise.
Right. It's that awkward feeling of wanting to address something, but not wanting to be too direct.
So how do we break out of that beating around the bush habit? Any tips for being more direct?
Well, I think being mindful of it is the first step, recognizing when we're doing it, and then just practicing being more straightforward, even if it feels a little uncomfortable at first.
Now picture this. You're at a party, you don't know many people, and you want to start a conversation. That's where you need to break the ice.
Oh, yes, break the ice. That's a classic one. It's all about easing that initial awkwardness, isn't it?
Exactly. It's about creating that first connection, like literally breaking through a sheet of ice to open up a pathway for conversation.
And sometimes it can be as simple as a compliment, like, I love your shoes.
Or even a simple question like, have you tried any of the appetizers yet? Anything to get the conversation flowing.
Exactly. And, sometimes humor can be a great icebreaker, too.
Oh, yeah. A well-timed joke can definitely lighten the mood.
It's all about finding that common ground, that shared moment of laughter.
Now, let's talk about something that can cost an arm and a leg. It's when something is just ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like, have you seen the prices of concert tickets these days?
Oh my gosh, they're insane.
It's like they want you to give up a limb just to see your favorite band.
It's that feeling of, it's really worth that much.
Right? But sometimes you just gotta splurge,
But let's talk about those satisfying moments when you get something exactly right, like when you hit the nail on the head.
Ah, yes, it's that feeling of nailing it, isn't it? Like when you perfectly describe a situation or you figure out the root cause of a problem.
With like that aha moment. And it likely comes from, actually hammering a nail and getting it perfectly straight.
Right. And it's such a satisfying feeling, whether you're talking about solving a problem or just understanding a concept.
So have you ever hit the nail on the head with something recently?
Let me think. Oh, actually, just the other day, a friend was describing a situation they were going through, and I was able to offer some advice that really resonated with them. They said, I hit the nail on the head.
It's like you were able to see the situation clearly and offer the perfect solution.
Exactly. It felt good to be able to help.
Now, switching gears a bit, have you ever been feeling under the weather?
Ooh, I think we all know that feeling. It's that kind of blah feeling when you're just not quite yourself.
Right, like maybe you have a slight cold or just feel a bit run down.
And no one wants to hear all your symptoms.
Exactly. Under the weather is a much gentler way to say, I'm not feeling great.
And I've always wondered where that one came from.
Me too. I've heard it might be related to sailors feeling seasick when the weather was rough.
Oh, that makes sense. Like the weather is literally affecting how you feel.
Now be careful not to let the cat out of the bag.
Oops. That's when you accidentally reveal a secret, isn't it?
Exactly. Like if you're planning a surprise party and someone spills the beans to the guest of honor.
I've always loved the imagery with that one. Like imagine a cat jumping out of a bag and everyone's surprised.
It's such a vivid way to describe that moment of, oh no, I shouldn't have said that.
And it happens to the best of us.
So how do we avoid those cat out of the bag situations? Any tips for keeping secrets safe?
I think sometimes it's better not to know the secret at all if you're someone who tends to blurt things out.
That's a great point. If you don't know, you can't accidentally reveal it.
Exactly. Or, just be extra careful about who you talk to and what you say.
But sometimes you just have to accept that the ball is in your court.
Ah, yes. That's when it's someone else's turn to make a decision or take action.
It's like passing the baton in a relay race.
Exactly. You've done your part, and now it's up to them to decide what to do next.
It's often used in negotiations or discussions, right?
Yes, like when you've presented your offer and you're waiting for the other person to respond.
And sometimes, to get things done, you just have to burn the midnight oil.
Yeah, that's a good one. It means staying up late, working, usually on a project or deadline.
Back in the day, it literally meant working by the light of an oil lamp.
Right. But nowadays, it's more about that feeling of burning the candle at both ends.
But sometimes, you have to face those challenges head on. Like when you have to bite the bullet.
It means doing something difficult or unpleasant, even though you don't want to.
Like going to the dentist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or having that tough conversation you've been putting off.
But on a brighter note, some things happen very rarely, like once in a blue moon.
Oh, I love this one. It's so poetic. And it actually refers to a real astronomical event, you know?
Really?
Yeah, when a second full moon occurs within the same calendar month. It doesn't actually look blue, though.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's something that happens very infrequently.
Exactly. Like winning the lottery or seeing a unicorn.
Now, let's talk about maximizing efficiency. It's like when you kill two birds with one stone.
Yes. It's about accomplishing two things with one action, isn't it?
Like if you need to go to the post office and the grocery store, and they're right next to each other, you can do both errands in one trip.
Exactly. It's all about being smart with your time and effort.
And sometimes things are surprisingly easy, like a piece of cake.
Oh, yeah. That's a great way to say something was simple and effortless.
It makes it sound almost enjoyable, right? Like it was no trouble at all.
Exactly. Like, that exam was a piece of cake.
But be careful not to put all your eggs in one basket.
Oh, yes. That's a good reminder. It's about diversification, isn't it? Not putting all your hopes or resources into one thing.
Exactly. It's like spreading your risk so if one thing doesn't work out, you have others to fall back on.
Right. Like, don't invest all your money in one stock. Or don't rely on just one person for your happiness.
Speaking of revealing secrets, sometimes you accidentally spill the beans.
Oops. That's like letting the cat out of the bag. Right. But maybe a bit more unintentional.
Right. It's like you just blurt something out without thinking.
And it can be so embarrassing.
It is. Especially if it's a secret that you're supposed to keep.
Oh, for sure. But sometimes it's just a funny slip-up.
But it's always important to consider different perspectives and not take everything at face value. That's when you take something with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it means being a little skeptical, doesn't it? Not believing everything you hear.
Especially in today's world, with so much information flying around, it's crucial to be discerning, to question things.
Right. Not everything is as it seems.
So how do you decide what to take with a grain of salt? What are some red flags?
That's a good question. I think it's about looking at the source of the information, you know. Is it a reliable source?
And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you just have to throw in the towel.
Yeah, that's when you admit defeat, isn't it? You realize it's time to give up.
It's like knowing when to walk away from a fight.
Right. It's not always easy, but sometimes it's the best thing to do.
And have you ever felt like you were barking up the wrong tree?
Oh, definitely. It's when you're pursuing a path or a solution that's just not going to work.
You're putting in all this effort, but you're headed in the wrong direction.
It's like you're lost in the woods and you keep going deeper and deeper, but you're not getting any closer to your destination.
Exactly. And sometimes it takes a while to realize that you're on the wrong track.
It does. But it's important to be able to recognize those dead ends and be willing to change course.
So how do you know when it's time to stop barking up the wrong tree and try a different approach?
I think it's about paying attention to the signs. You know, if you're not making any progress, if you keep hitting roadblocks, it might be time to step back and reassess your strategy.
That's great advice. Now, wouldn't it be amazing to always have the best of both worlds?
That is the dream, isn't it? It's like having your cake and eating it too.
Exactly. It's about finding that perfect balance, that ideal situation where you get the advantages of two seemingly opposite things.
Like imagine working from home, but still having that sense of community and collaboration that comes from being in an office.
But sometimes you just have to throw caution to the wind and go for it.
Oh, absolutely. It's about embracing risk and spontaneity, letting go of your fears and just going for it.
It's like that feeling of freedom and excitement when you decide to do something unexpected.
Exactly. Like quitting your job to travel the world.
And finally, going above and beyond, giving it your all, that's going the extra mile.
It's about exceeding expectations, isn't it? Putting in that extra effort to make something truly special.
Like staying late to help a colleague finish a project or going out of your way to make a customer happy. It's those little things that make a big difference.
And, you know, going the extra mile doesn't always have to be about work. It can be about anything, really.
Oh, absolutely. It's about that attitude of always striving to do your best.
Exactly. And it's something that people really appreciate, whether it's in your personal or professional life.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, explored 21 essential idioms. What stands out to you so far? Any favorites?
So many great ones. I think bite the bullet is one that really resonates with me. It's a reminder that sometimes we just have to face those challenges head on, even if it's uncomfortable. What about you?
I think the best of both worlds really appeals to me. That idea of finding balance and enjoying the benefits of different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a reminder that we don't always have to choose one thing over another. Sometimes we can find a way to have it all.
Exactly. And that's a great note to end on for this part of our deep dive. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of these idioms, but we'll be back soon to explore even more of their nuances and applications.
Looking forward to it. I think for me, bite the bullet is one of the ones that really stands out.
Yeah, I get that. Knowing the history behind it too, like, wow.
It just highlights that kind of courage,
Right.
that we need to face things we don't really want to.
Like steeling yourself, getting ready.
Totally.
And have you ever had to bite the bullet recently?
Oh, all the time. I think we all do, right?
Yeah.
But one that comes to mind is I remember having to give a presentation to, a huge audience.
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah. And I was so terrified, but I knew I just had to bite the bullet, get up there and do it.
And I bet once you did, it wasn't so bad.
It's always like that, right? The anticipation is worse.
The build-up. And it makes you stronger, too, each time.
Oh, absolutely. And that actually makes me think of barking up the wrong tree, because sometimes you think you're, doing the right thing.
Putting in all this effort.
And then you realize, this is a dead end.
You're headed in the wrong direction.
Completely. And that happens a lot, I think, especially today with so much information.
Oh, yeah. It's overwhelming.
It really is. And so it's easy to get sidetracked.
Yeah, to go down rabbit holes.
But I think there's a lot of value in recognizing that you're doing that.
Totally.
And then you can say, okay, well, what other options do I have? How else can I approach this?
It's about being flexible, being adaptable.
Yeah, and I think that leads us nicely to the best of both worlds, because...
Ooh, the ideal.
Right. Because sometimes you do have to choose one or the other, but sometimes you can find a way to get the benefits of both.
To kind of merge them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, having that flexibility of working remotely, but also still having that in-person connection.
Yeah, that sense of community.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to throw caution to the wind.
And just go for it.
Right.
I love those moments.
Those are the best, those spontaneous decisions.
Absolutely. Even if it's a little bit scary, a little bit risky.
Like quitting your job to travel the world.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
But so freeing. Right.
It is. And I think those are the moments that really can shape our lives.
Yeah, those leaps of faith.
For sure.
And then it's about putting in that extra effort, going the extra mile.
Yes, it's like going above and beyond.
Right, really making a difference.
Yeah, exceeding those expectations.
So have you gone the extra mile for anything lately?
I've been really focused on a project at work.
Okay.
I've been, putting in the extra hours and really trying to make sure it's the best it can be.
To make it shine.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how to use these idioms, but I think it's also interesting to think about what they reveal about the culture of English speakers.
What do you think?
Well, I think one theme that keeps coming up is hard work, perseverance.
Yeah, I see that. Like, bite the bullet, burn the midnight oil. It's like you push through those challenges.
You don't give up.
Exactly.
You get it done.
And then you also have throw caution to the wind, which is more about that kind of risk-taking spirit.
Yeah, that adventurous side.
So it's interesting. It's like there's that balance.
Of both.
Yeah, you work hard, but you're not afraid to try new things and take a chance.
And the best of both worlds speaks to that, that balance, compromise.
Yeah, like finding the middle ground.
Yeah.
Trying to see things from different perspectives.
And take it with a grain of salt, which is kind of like, don't believe everything you hear, right?
Question things.
Be a critical thinker.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what would you say are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think don't be afraid to start using these idioms. The more you use them, the more natural they'll feel.
Practice makes perfect.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to remember that idioms are more than just words. They're really a window into the culture.
Yeah, they tell us something about the values and the beliefs of the people who use them.
So pay attention to how people use them in different contexts, and you'll start to pick up on those nuances.
Yeah, you'll gain a deeper understanding, not just of the language, but of the culture as well.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to see how much we can learn just from these little phrases. It's like they're little time capsules of culture. So let's talk a little bit more about that connection between language and culture.
Yeah.
Do you think the idioms we use, do they actually influence how we think?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question.
Right. It makes you wonder, like, if these phrases that we use all the time,
Yeah.
if they kind of subtly shape our perceptions of the world,
Yeah.
like spill the beans, for example, does that say something about a culture that values discretion?
Yeah.
Or does using that idiom actually reinforce that value, make us more aware of keeping secrets?
Yeah, it's like, which came first?
The chicken or the egg?
Exactly. Does language reflect culture, or does it shape it?
Or maybe a bit of both.
I think it's probably a bit of both,
Yeah.
you know? It's this kind of back and forth
Yeah.
between the words we use and how we see the world.
And that makes me think about throw caution to the wind, too.
Yeah.
Does that reflect a culture that's maybe more prone to taking risks?
Yeah, or does it encourage us to be more adventurous, you know?
Right. To embrace those leaps of faith and the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Does that suggest that we like balance, compromise?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it actually encourage us to seek out those win-win situations?
Yeah. It's really fascinating to think about.
It's like language is this tool that can both reflect and influence our values and beliefs.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes learning idioms, you know, so much fun. Yeah. It's not just about the words themselves. It's about what they tell us about the culture and about ourselves, really.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these 21 essential idioms, what would you say is your biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Don't just memorize them, experience them.
Ooh, I love that.
You know, listen for them when you hear people talking, when you watch movies, when you listen to music.
See how they're using them in real life.
Exactly. And try using them yourself. You know, the more you use them,
the more natural they'll feel.
Absolutely.
And it's like anything else you're learning. The more you immerse yourself, the more it becomes part of you. And the more you explore language, the more you appreciate its beauty and its power.
It's true. Language it's a gift.
It is.
You know, it's a way to connect with other people and to understand different cultures.
To build bridges.
Exactly. And idioms are like little gems.
They are.
That add so much richness to our communication.
So keep exploring, keep discovering, and keep diving deep into the world of words.
Yes.
Who knows what treasures you'll uncover.
Happy exploring. And until next time, may your conversations be filled with colorful idioms and insightful discoveries. Hey there, fellow bookworms. Ready to level up your reading game? Today we're going deep, way past just finishing a book.
Yeah, think Reading Ninja. This is your secret decoder ring for unlocking those hidden layers of meaning in anything you read.
And our guide. This awesome piece, 7 tips to improve your reading at an advanced level. Practical advice, not just theory.
Totally. And it uses some really cool examples like switching between Great Gatsby and Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, you know, to really stretch those reading muscles.
I love that, reading against the grain. It's so easy to stay in our comfort zones. What about you? What do you usually gravitate towards? What would be a surprising genre for you?
Oh, good question. I tend to lean towards nonfiction, history, biographies, that kind of thing. But to shake things up, maybe a graphic novel. Or poetry. I don't read a ton of poetry.
I get that. I love a good mystery, but I've been meaning to try more sci-fi, see what's out there. Which brings us to tip number 1, diversify your reading diet. The source is all about exploring different genres, styles, and topics.
Makes sense, right? Like food. You don't want to eat the same thing every day. You miss out on all those flavors and nutrients. Same with reading. Each genre has its own strengths, its own way of seeing the world.
Exactly. And they even suggest this cool activity. Read a news article on climate change, then read a poem on the same topic. See how different forms of writing can change your understanding.
That's such a good idea. The news article gives you the facts, right? But the poem might explore the emotional side, the impact on people. 2 totally different angles, but both important for understanding the whole picture.
Totally. Tip number 2 is all about active reading, something I'm always working on. It's about engaging with the text, not just skimming.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens. Active reading is like having a conversation with the author, asking questions, pushing back, making those connections in your own mind.
The source talks about the SQ3R method. Can you break that down for us? Why is it so helpful, especially with really complex texts?
I see SQ3R as a brain hack for better reading. It stands for survey, question, read, recite, review. Especially with dense stuff, it makes you slow down and engage on different levels. Like if you're reading the Federalist Papers, before diving in, you'd survey the structure, maybe skim headings or topic sentences.
So kind of setting the stage, getting an overview.
Exactly. Then you come up with questions based on what you see. What are the main points? What arguments is the author making? Now you're actively searching for answers as you read.
It's like a detective game.
Yes. Then the read phase, where you actively look for those answers.
Wait.
Next, you recite or summarize what you read in your own words. This helps solidify your understanding. And finally, review to make sure you remember the key points.
Intense, but it sounds super effective, especially for those brain bender books.
A mental workout, but a good one.
Okay, tip number 3 always gets me excited. Expanding our vocabulary. They suggest keeping a vocabulary journal, which sounds fun.
Like building your arsenal of words.
But what about those words that just completely stump you, like singularity in Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time? I remember just staring at that one, completely lost.
I know that feeling. You got to become a word detective. Context is everything. You can often figure out the meaning using root words, prefixes, suffixes, break it down into smaller parts.
Like solving a puzzle. And once you crack the code, that word unlocks a whole new level of understanding. I had that with epistemology in a philosophy book. I finally broke it down. Episteme meaning knowledge, and logos meaning study. Boom, the study of knowledge.
It's the best feeling. And those aha moments build on each other. Every new word opens up more understanding. You can tackle even more complex stuff.
Brain leveling up. Tip number 4 is where it gets interesting. Author's craft. Understanding the why behind an author's choices.
It's like peeking behind the curtain, seeing the magician's secrets.
Totally. They use 1984 as an example how Orwell creates that feeling of oppression through his writing. What are some clues we can look for to get an author's purpose?
Oh, so many. Tone, imagery, sentence structure, rhetorical devices, they all add up. Like, think about it. A short, choppy sentence creates urgency, tension, right? But a long, flowing one might feel more thoughtful.
Like composing music with words, using different instruments to create different effects.
Great analogy. And you, as the reader, start to pick up on those little cues. You see how everything plays a role. Word choice, pacing, even punctuation.
Like learning a secret language. They suggest analyzing a paragraph from Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse to really examine the sentence structure. I challenge you, try that with anything you're reading. Pick a passage and dissect it. It's amazing what you find.
I agree. Ask yourself, what choices are they making and why? You'll see patterns, appreciate the craft even more.
Okay, tip number 5 gets into summarizing and critical thinking. Essential skills for any advanced reader. I'll admit, sometimes I just want to get lost in the story, but slowing down to analyze is crucial too.
It's like the difference between watching a movie passively versus really engaging with it. When you summarize, you got to boil things down to the essence, really understand the main points. Critical thinking is about questioning assumptions, looking at different perspectives, and evaluating the evidence.
They talk about summarizing an article on AI, which is constantly changing. Imagine trying to sum up all those complex ideas.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
But so valuable. Critical thinking is even more important now. We're bombarded with information from everywhere. You got to be able to tell fact from opinion, bias from objectivity.
It's about being a smart consumer of information, not just believing everything you read.
Exactly. And a great way to practice those skills is joining a book club or discussion group.
Have you ever read Thoreau's Civil Disobedience? Talk about sparking debate. Those ideas about individual conscience versus the state are still so relevant. Imagine discussing that in a book club. Things could get heated in a good way.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that one. A book club is like having your own team of experts to bounce ideas off of. You hear different interpretations, challenge your own assumptions. You might discover things you missed on your own.
It's like having multiple lenses to view the same material. Plus, you might find new authors or genres you wouldn't have tried otherwise. And it's just fun to geek out with other book lovers.
Totally. It's a built-in support system for your reading journey.
Speaking of support, ready for tip number 6. This one might surprise you. Reading aloud.
I know, right? It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but trust me, there are benefits, especially for complex texts.
They even suggest trying it with Shakespearean sonnets. To appreciate the rhythm and flow, like adding another dimension to the words.
It is. It forces you to slow down, enunciate clearly, savor the language. Especially helpful with poetry, but even with prose it makes a difference. Imagine tackling a dense philosophical argument out loud. It becomes so much clearer.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. It's like using more of your senses to engage with the material.
Exactly. And remember, we learned language through sound first. Reading aloud taps into that. Plus, think about when we were kids reading aloud together. We learned so much that way.
I loved those read-alouds in school. And the source even says, record yourself reading aloud and listen back.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It might feel awkward, but it's a fantastic way to see where you stumble, work on pronunciation, improve fluency, like your own personal coach.
I'm adding that to my toolkit. Okay, our final tip. Goal setting. I'm all about goals, but sometimes I'm not sure where to start, especially with something as broad as reading.
I get that. The source uses War and Peace as an example, which is a big one, but they have a great point. Break down big goals into smaller chunks.
So instead of I'm going to read War and Peace, it's I'm going to read 50 pages a week.
Exactly. It feels much less scary.
Yeah.
And you get that sense of accomplishment as you hit those smaller milestones.
And there are great tools to help you track your progress. I love Goodreads. It's so motivating to see what you've read, find new books, share your thoughts.
It's a great community for book lovers.
Yeah.
And speaking of community, they mentioned book clubs again. There's nothing like connecting with other readers and really diving deep together.
It's like a cheering squad for your reading journey. So we've covered a lot. Diversifying our reading, active reading, vocabulary, author's craft, summarizing, reading aloud, and goal setting. It's been quite the exploration of becoming a more advanced reader.
It has. And I hope our listeners feel inspired to take their reading to that next level.
Me too. You know, as we wrap up this part, it makes me think about the power of reading. It's not just about knowledge. It's about understanding the world and ourselves better.
That's beautifully put. It's about empathy, critical thinking, opening ourselves up to new perspectives and possibilities.
Exactly. And it's a journey that never really ends. There's always something new to discover, a new connection to make.
And with the right tools and techniques, we can keep growing as readers our whole lives.
I love that. So, as we wrap up this segment of our deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought. What's one book or article you've always wanted to read, but felt intimidated by?
What's that one that's been sitting on your shelf, whispering promises of adventure?
Maybe it's a classic, a dense philosophical work, or something scientific that's always intrigued you. Now is the time to embrace the challenge.
Use the tips we've discussed and approach it with confidence, curiosity, a sense of adventure. You might be surprised.
Now, before we move on to part 2, we want to hear from you. What's one aha moment you've had while reading? Share your stories, your insights, your favorite reading techniques. We'll be back soon with more on how to level up your reading game.
That reminds me of when I was wrestling with this really dense philosophy book, and I was just stuck. I tried recording myself reading it aloud just to see, and honestly,
What happened?
it was like someone else was reading. I picked up on all these things I totally missed before.
It's amazing how just changing how you interact with the text can do that. Like
Yeah.
unlock it. Speaking of unlocking, tip number 6 is all about reading aloud.
Yeah, I know, right? Sounds a bit old school.
Yeah, like elementary school. But the source makes a good case for it, especially for becoming more advanced readers.
Essentially.
They even suggest reading Shakespeare out loud, like those sonnets,
Oh, yeah.
to get the rhythm and flow. What's the idea there?
When you read silently, don't you think you kind of skim? Your mind races ahead.
Oh, for sure.
But reading aloud, you got to slow down, enunciate every word, really savor the language. Like it adds this whole other dimension.
Almost like performing it, bringing
Yeah.
it to life. So you pick up on those subtle things you might miss otherwise.
Exactly. And it's not just poetry. Think about a tough philosophical argument or even a legal document. Reading it aloud can make it so much clearer.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's like using more of your senses to really engage with it, which helps you remember it better too.
Right. And we learn language through hearing first, don't we? Yeah. So reading aloud kind of taps into that. Plus, it's like when we were kids reading aloud together.
Yeah.
Remember how much we absorbed?
I do. Those were great. And the source even says to try recording yourself reading aloud and listening back.
I know it sounds a little weird.
Yeah, but it could be really helpful.
Absolutely. You can hear where you trip up, work on pronunciation, get more fluent overall. It's like having your own personal coach.
I gotta try that. Okay, last tip from the source. Goal setting. I'm a huge believer in goals, but I'm not always sure where to begin with reading. It can feel so overwhelming.
I understand that. They use War and Peace as an example, which, yeah.
That's a big one, intimidating. But their point is, break it down.
Exactly. So instead of I'm going to read War and Peace, maybe it's I'm going to read 50 pages a week.
Right. Way less daunting.
And you get that feeling of accomplishment as you hit those smaller goals.
Which keeps you motivated. And there are great tools to help, like Goodreads. I love that. Seeing your progress, finding new books, sharing your thoughts.
It's such a great community for book lovers. And that brings us back to community in general, right?
Yeah. Book clubs, online groups, even just friends you swap books with. It makes a difference.
Totally. Having other readers around you, it's like a support system.
A cheering squad for your reading.
I like that. And with all this talk about tips and goals, it's important to remember, reading should be fun.
Oh, absolutely.
We can get so caught up in improving that we forget to enjoy a good book.
So true. It shouldn't feel like work.
It's like anything else. You got to find that sweet spot between challenge and pleasure.
All right, we've done a deep dive on these 7 tips, but before we go, I want to ask you, the listener, what really stuck with you?
Was there one that was like, aha, that's it?
Or maybe a challenge you're ready to tackle now?
Want to hear your thoughts. Reading is a journey, and the best ones are shared.
So let's keep talking. What are your favorite ways to level up your reading game? We'll be back with more soon. So we've been talking about all these great tips for becoming better readers. But sometimes, even with the best techniques, you just hit a wall.
For sure.
You get those books, those articles, even just certain paragraphs, and you're like, ugh, this is a struggle.
Yeah.
And it can be so discouraging. You're excited to read something new, and then it just doesn't click. What do you do when you run into that, when you're just not connecting?
Well, first you got to remember, it's okay. It's normal to struggle with certain things.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're a bad reader or that the writing is bad. Sometimes it's just not a good fit for you.
I like that, giving yourself permission to not love everything.
Exactly. Once you accept that, you can look at those tougher texts with more, maybe a little kindness towards yourself and curiosity.
So instead of getting frustrated, you ask, okay, what's making this hard for me?
Yeah. Is it the vocabulary, the sentences, the topic itself?
Right.
And once you figure out what it is, you can start to find ways to deal with it. Vocabulary. Maybe you grab the dictionary or look for clues in the surrounding words. Tricky sentences. Break them down into smaller parts or read them aloud. See if the rhythm helps.
You're like a reading detective, using your tools to crack the case.
I love that. And sometimes the best thing is to just walk away for a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Go for a walk, listen to music, do something completely different. Come back with fresh eyes.
That distance can really help. It's like with a painting, you step back to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And honestly, remember that reading should be fun. If you're always fighting with it, feeling frustrated, maybe it's time to try something else.
I agree. A different genre, a new author, or even an old favorite that always makes you happy. There's so many amazing books out there. There's something for everyone.
For sure. The important thing is to find what you're curious about, what sparks your imagination.
As we wrap up this whole deep dive into reading, it keeps coming back to this. It's so personal.
It really is.
We can learn techniques, we can get better at it, but at the end of the day, it's that connection you make with what you're reading.
It's like connecting with another mind, even if they lived centuries ago, exploring new worlds, understanding ourselves and the universe better.
A journey of discovery. And like all good journeys, the best thing is to go with curiosity, a sense of wonder, and be open to getting a little lost along the way.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never lose that sense of wonder. That's the magic of reading.
That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you found some inspiration to level up your reading game. Until next time, happy reading.